All right. So I'm going to share my screen here. Oops. Maybe. Okay. Are you all seeing?
I must say that Andrea did the finishing touches on this presentation, and she did a very lovely job.
Oh, well, thank you, Tony. Really, the credit, I think, goes to PowerPoint. I love the fact that they give you slide design choices.
Yes.
So it made the slide design easier. So that was good, but I appreciate that comment. All right, hopefully everyone can see the presentation in presentation mode. I'm having a hard time seeing everybody when it's like this on my screen. So if there are questions or if something isn't displaying the way that it should, just yell at me because I may not see people gesturing or anything like that. But to start things off, we just want to thank you all for joining us for part 2 of the advocacy training series. You'll recall that we did our first session several weeks back now. The date is kind of escaping me. The holidays have really made me feel like I've lost track of time, but hopefully most of you were able to join us for that. That training was really intended to be kind of a high-level conceptual overview of what lobbying and advocacy is. This training is intended to be a little more nuts and bolts. Now that we're getting ready to start our operations for the 2022 legislative session for LAC, we want to try and make this sort of having a practical focus, so you all have a sense of what you'll be doing, particularly our new members who may not be familiar with how LAC operates. And hopefully this will be a good refresher for those who have been members for a long time, and point you in the direction of some tools that might be useful. So here's a little glimpse at our agenda. I'm going to take the first 2 parts of the agenda, speaking to the lobbyist activities, basically your role as an LAC member, and point you in the direction of tools that are out there that hopefully will really support you in that work and make this a pleasant process and an interesting process. I'm also going to say just a little bit about League action alerts. And then at that point, I will turn it over to Tony for the second half of our presentation on League relationships and LAC's role with ballot issues. Okay, so I think everyone is very aware that we're on the cusp of the start of the second regular session of the 73rd General Assembly. They will convene on Wednesday, January 12th at 10 a.m. You can see on the slide the link to the General Assembly website. We use this site a lot in combination with Colorado Capitol Watch. So I just wanted to make sure that, as you have this slide deck, there's some useful links for and web addresses for you all to utilize along the way. I have not heard anything about pauses in the session or delays in the session. Obviously, we're really in a COVID spike right now. The General Assembly is much better set up to conduct business remotely than they were when all this first started. So I'm thinking that if they have to switch to remote operations, hopefully it'll be a smoother transition than it's been in the past, over the past couple of sessions. But I've not personally heard anything that there's going to be delays. I don't know if others have heard anything. I would be very curious. So please feel free to chime in if you happen to have information on that. But as far as we know, I think it's the schedule as anticipated. Okay, so the information on the next several slides focuses on key activities of the LAC and things that you'll be doing as an LAC member. I tried to break this down into steps. So you're going to see step 1, step 2, all that on the slides that follow, to really kind of try and illustrate the progression of the work that takes place as we gear up for operations and then as we carry out our work during the session. Longtime members will be very familiar with this. Please feel free as we go through, if you have, tips or information that would be helpful to share with newer members. The idea was to try and put this in manageable bite-sized chunks for those who are newer to the LAC or those that maybe have not participated in past years. Hopefully it will accomplish that. So our LAC meetings, first thing that you want to do as an LAC member is join the LAC meetings. We meet every other Friday throughout the session. Our meetings will begin on Friday, January 21st from 9 to 11 a.m. and then they'll be continuing on a weekly basis after that. The purpose of the meeting overall is to discuss key legislation that's impacting our organizational positions and vote on whether we'll support, oppose, or if in some cases we may, after that deliberation, we may just decide that we monitor a bill. Our goal for this session was to try and meet in person. I don't know that that's feasible right now or desirable for most people. You do see the link there for virtual meetings. I think if I'm recalling correctly, I think this has been emailed to you. I'll make sure that you all get it again before January 21st, but this is the link that we'll use throughout the session. So it'll just be a good thing to have on hand so you have easy access to join the virtual meetings. We've had a lot of discussion over the interim and even going back into the previous session with members about the structure and the format of the LAC meetings. And we understand that there's really a clear desire among LAC members to see our meeting discussions be more streamlined than what they've been, and to see meetings that don't exceed 2 hours. So that's why we're kind of calling out that 9 to 11 time slot. I know in the past meetings, have been pretty lengthy at times, and the discussion is great, but we do want to, be mindful of the fact that, being an LAC member can be a pretty heavy time commitment. And we know that everyone has very busy schedules. So we want to try and be as effective and streamlined in the course of the meeting as we possibly can. And so there's a couple of things that we wanted to discuss today that we're hoping will help that. But, as always, we're very open to suggestions and ideas around there. One of the things that, I think is maybe not so much a change, but we really want to emphasize the practice is that we really want to be focusing our discussions and the deliberation that's needed in order for LAC members to vote on key legislation within each of the policy areas that we're covering. So it's not to say that, you can't cover more than, whatever the, priority bill is in any particular topic. Our issue area teams or our individual lobbyists in a particular issue area are certainly free and encouraged to monitor legislation that you think is worth us paying attention to, but may not rise to the level of something that we want to spend meeting time discussing. So, to do that, that's something that you'd be kind of monitoring in the background. We welcome bill summaries on that more or that lower priority legislation, so we can get that up on the website. I think that's very useful for our members, but we really want to try and dedicate our meeting time to priority bills in each of the areas that really require a vote, and not spend time discussing bills that we really only intend to monitor. Tony, do you have anything to add to that or any additional thoughts on that piece?
No.
Okay, that sounds good. Please just feel free to jump in if you do as we go along. Okay, so once you're tuned in on the meeting schedule and how to participate in those, the next thing we want all of you to do is to register as a volunteer lobbyist. The General Assembly requires that volunteer lobbyists register. You can access the registration form through the link that's here on the slide. We also have it in the advocacy toolkit that is on the website. And I do have information on one of the slides about how to locate that if you haven't seen it already. And we can email out additional information on that too, just to make sure that everyone's got easy access to that. But basically the link here will take you to the registration form. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a one-page thing, kind of providing contact information, and then you'll submit it to the Chief Clerk of the House of Representatives, who is Robin Jones, and you can do that via email. You can also drop it off in person. As I mentioned, I have not heard that there's going to be any kind of delay or pause. So the assumption is that you can do things in person as well to the extent that you're comfortable doing that. But there are some pretty good options to conduct business as remote or almost exclusively remotely if that's what feels most comfortable for you.
Andrea, one second.
Yeah, go ahead, Maud.
Back to the previous thing of we talk about taking positions on key legislation. If we're just monitoring a bill and not planning to speak on it, then we don't need to bring it up, right?
That's correct. We really encourage, to the extent that you think that there's legislation that you want to monitor and that you think it would be helpful for our membership to know about, we really encourage you to do bill summaries on those particular pieces of legislation, and we'll get that information on the website. But we really want to kind of get away from the practice of discussing kind of all the bills that are introduced in a topic area, because that can be extremely lengthy. And really, we need to dedicate the deliberation time to bills that need an LIC vote.
And when Andrea says bill summaries, she means written bill summaries.
That's correct. And I do have a slide in maybe a slide or two that talks a little bit about that, because we do want to change our process a little bit there. So I'll touch on that too, and change the way we use Capital Watch a little bit too, but I will get there in just a second. The last thing I wanted to point out on this slide before I move on is that there's also a link for the webpage on the General Assembly site that discusses guidelines for lobbyists. It discusses requirements for both paid and volunteer lobbyists. You want to be focusing in on the information that pertains to volunteer lobbyists, but there's just a lot of information there about the state law governing the practice, what constitutes lobbying, what type of activity is prohibited, that sort of thing. So it's a good refresher for those who are familiar and have seen it in the past. For those that are new to this, you may want to check that out. Okay, so on this slide, the next thing that we want to do, after we're set up for our meetings, you're registered as a volunteer lobbyist, you're basically ready to go. We just need to figure out, okay, so how are we focusing our work? And I know many of you who are returning LIC members have already indicated that you're either sticking with areas that you've covered in the past, or you might want to explore a new area. I appreciate those responses, and I do have that information. If you're newer to the LIC, or you're not really sure, that's perfectly fine too. The only thing we would ask is that you give these categories a glance and maybe give a little bit of thought to the topics that might be appealing to you, either that you have an interest in, you feel passionate about, maybe you have professional experience in one of these areas that's would position you well to advocate in that area. But as you can see, these are the categories that align with LWVCO positions. I do want to point out that we have not always had, in my time with the league, I don't think we've ever had coverage in all of these areas. And some areas don't see as much legislation. Some kind of go quiet one session and then see a surge of activity in another session. So, it kind of varies just depending on where the focus is. But we would encourage you, if you haven't kind of settled on an issue, to give these some thoughts and figure out, how you might want to focus your work for the LAC, what categories interest you. I also want to mention that in many cases, we utilize issue area teams. So, in some areas, voting and housing are two that come to mind, where we have, several people covering those issues, which is fantastic. That's something that we really like to see for a few reasons. One is hopefully it's more fun that way. Hopefully it gives you people to discuss issues that you care about with other people. It provides opportunities for more input and collaboration, somebody to bounce things off of, that sort of thing. But it also kind of helps with coverage too. As the session gets going, those of you who've been doing this for a long time know that, it can be really tricky to, particularly if you're following more than one bill, to cover all of the committee hearings that you might want to attend, plus tending to your own schedule, things outside of LAC. So with issue area teams, it's nice because, there's a little bit more flexibility. We have more coverage and we can kind of protect against scheduling conflicts that are, naturally going to come up. In other areas, we only have an individual lobbyist covering the topic, and that is perfectly fine as well. It's in some cases it's just kind of worked out that way. So there's certainly no reason that that can't continue. But my main point of bringing it up is to let you know that if there's an issue that interests you, but you see that there are others already working on it, don't assume that that issue is taken, because we really do encourage a team approach wherever it's possible. And the last thing I want to say about, bill categories and, ways to focus your work is that we are very interested in having somebody follow legislation that has got a JEDI impact. So when we say that, we're meaning justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So, I know in the past, many of you have been fantastic about calling out those impacts within legislation that you're following for your primary topic area. Oh, does somebody have a question?
Bring it here. I can't see it.
Oh, Joe.
I'm sorry. I'm on mute.
No problem. I just want to make sure you didn't have a question. In the past, many of our lobbyists have been great about pointing out those JEDI implications in the topic areas that they primarily focus on. But we know that there's a lot more that we might want to advocate for, that we want to be paying attention to, that maybe don't neatly fall in one of our position categories. So if we could have somebody that was a little bit more dedicated to that, and was really looking at legislation across the board that has those JEDI considerations that, you think we need to be paying attention to, that is a very welcome role. So, and again, a team approach here would be fantastic, because I think this could be, it could be a lot of legislation.
And I would suggest that maybe at the end of everybody's little summaries that they put either there is no impact or there is an impact, so that we don't forget that we're looking at the legislation for that particular purpose.
That is a great point. I think, we've tried to highlight that in the past in our bill summaries, and I think that that's something that, certainly we want to continue to do again. So if you can make sure that you are calling that out, that's a really great way to make sure that we're highlighting those impacts. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Once you've landed on your issue area, or you've got your team of people that are going to be covering a topic along with you, the next thing to do is to monitor legislation and track bills. So we really want to, the key thing that I want to point out here, because I know it can be a little bit overwhelming, as legislation kind of starts flying out, especially if you're covering a topic that, is seeing a lot of activity that session. It can be difficult, particularly in the beginning, to have a good sense of, what we should be paying attention to and what we shouldn't. And really the key thing that should be our first consideration is that we want to identify bills in your issue area that are strongly aligned or perhaps strongly opposed to our organizational positions. So we want to be looking out for things that we think are either really going to advance things that we believe as an organization, or if we feel like it's really in opposition and this is detrimental to our position and who we are as an organization, that's a bill that we certainly want to follow as well, and testify on and all of that. But obviously we would take an opposed position on it as opposed to support. And if we don't have a position on a bill, if it just doesn't line up, then there's certainly no reason you can't follow it as an individual, but it's not something that we would follow for LAC. So that's kind of the key thing there. Beyond that, you really do just kind of want to take a look at the legislation that is coming out in your issue area and, sort of assess, is this more of a technical kind of thing? Is it having a big impact? Is it creating a new program or a new policy? You'll kind of get a sense of the things that really seem to be the priority legislation that you think you want to call to LAC's attention and have us actually take a vote on. We do want you all to prepare bill summaries to discuss at LAC. Anne, I see you have a question.
Maybe you're going to cover this when you get to discussing Capital Watch, but for example, in the environmental area, we probably had 30 bills last year. Not all of them were key, of course, and we kind of split them up according to interest area and topic area and did communication by email. But should we list them all in our Capital Watch notes just so that we'll keep getting alerts? In other words, maybe I only covered 6 bills, but maybe there were 20 that I wanted to know what was happening. And if I listed them on the Capital Watch page, then I would be certain to get an email alert. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. And that's a great point to bring up, Anne. It is something that I definitely want to touch on because we are going to change the way that we use Capital Watch this session. One thing that won't change are the email alerts that you're referencing. And this is something that won't be familiar to new people, but just to kind of give you a little bit of context for what we're talking about here. Capital Watch is our bill tracking system that we've used for a few years, and we've experimented with different ways of using it. And, after thinking it through and having a lot of conversations with all of you over the interim and prior, I do think that we are going to switch up how we use it, shifting from a system of, where, all of the LAC lobbyists are inputting directly into the system, and instead utilizing a few key Capital Watch administrators that would enter the bill summaries into Capital Watch. And, to your question, Anne, about whether we list all those, I think that's part of, I think, the judgment call for the individual lobbyist or the issue area team. If it's stuff that we're just monitoring, but you still think that, this is something that I would like, or maybe we don't dedicate meeting time to discussing and we're not going to take a vote on this because we know we just want to monitor, but you still think that it's valuable for our members to know about it, and you think that, there is, somewhat of an impact to our organizational positions, we'd really encourage you to do bill summaries there. So, our membership that does not participate in LAC has a full sense of the stuff that we think is important. And then we'll clearly call out the position so they understand that, this isn't something that, we're supporting or opposing. We're not necessarily going to testify on this, but, they kind of have a sense that it's out there. Where the Capital Watch alerts are concerned, that is something for those who have not used the system before. Once we're settled on who is working within each issue area, I'll go in and enter email addresses for the people that are associated with a specific bill topic. So like environment, there's a team that works on this issue. So the full team would receive Capitol Watch email alerts about, when the bill is up for floor work or a committee hearing, that sort of thing. And it gives you, the date and time and the room location and all that. So it's a really handy thing to have, especially towards the end of the session, as it can become, it doesn't sound like it would be a hard thing to determine, but sometimes it is a little hard to know, particularly with much notice, when and where a bill is going to be heard in committee. Things start to move pretty fast. And I will say that Capitol Watch does a very nice job of keeping up with that. So that is certainly a tool that we will continue to use, and you'll continue getting alerts, and then it'll be up to you to kind of sort through that to figure out what's the priority legislation, what's maybe second tier, but we still want to pay attention, and what's the stuff that we know is out there, but we're not going to do anything with it. Hopefully that answers your question, Anne. Okay, I see a wave, so let me know if I can explain anything further. The other thing I want to point out, I mentioned that we will really utilize the General Assembly website in combination with Capitol Watch. There's the link here. There was a link before. I just want to make sure that it's easy for you all to find. The homepage of the General Assembly site, once the session gets underway, you'll see the activity listed for the day. You can access calendars and the specific schedules for the committees, and then track bill status information, get the text of the bill, all that sort of thing. So you'll be able to get it there. You'll be able to utilize our bill lists on Capitol Watch, which will be posted on the State League website. So there's several different ways for you to access the information. And you are welcome to utilize any or some combination of it that works best for you. Kathy, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, I just need clarification, because we have the summaries that go on the our state website. Are those different? Want to do Capitol Watch?
Kathy, I'm. It looks to me like I'm not sure if the problem's on my end or with your internet. You're kind of freezing up. I think you're asking if the Capitol Watch summaries are different than, and that was about where
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, the next thing I wanted to touch on. Are you there, Kathy? You kind of cut out again.
Sorry, it's my internet. It's not you, it's my internet that's having a problem.
You might try turning off your camera. That sometimes helps a little bit. I think I understand your question. It's actually the next point that I wanted to bring up. We still want you all to do bill summaries. The only difference would be that instead of you all having to go in and enter your bills and bill summaries in Capitol Watch, the Capitol Watch administrators will do that. The thing that is maybe a little bit different, although I think some of you do this prior to LAC meetings anyway, is that Tony and I would request that you all prepare the bill summaries that you want to discuss during the meeting, that you do that prior to the LAC meeting and send those to us, so we have them ready to go and they can be quickly entered into Capitol Watch following our meeting. So we very much still want you to prepare the summaries. We're just kind of trying to lighten the workload a little bit, because we do know LAC can be a bit of a heavy lift. And we know that, some people really like using Capitol Watch. There are others that really hate it. So, we want to try and, just streamline the process, make it as easy as possible. So if you can prepare those bill summaries ahead of time, email them on to Tony and I. We will discuss in the meeting any vote that comes out of that. We will note, and we will get all that information on Capitol Watch. I'm kind of hearing some feedback. Hopefully you all are hearing me okay. And then the key things that we want to make sure that we're including in those bill summaries, you know, identifying information, obviously the bill number, the title, and the sponsors. We want to be really clear about identifying and discussing the LWVCO position that is implicated through the legislation that's being considered, and we'll give our rationale for why we're either supporting or opposing a bill. You'd need to provide a brief summary of what the bill is doing and how it impacts the state league position that is relevant in this particular case. And then if you could give a brief summary of the current bill status, that would be helpful as well. What we're really looking for there in particular is any notable discussion or action that came out of the committee hearings. We're kind of looking to, we don't really want to ask you to just, you know, rehash information that is easily gathered through Capitol Watch or through the General Assembly site. So you don't necessarily have to, you know, spend a lot of time collecting information on, you know, where it's going, where the bill is being routed next, you know, the vote, all that sort of thing. We really want to, you know, kind of focus in on, you know, any notable lobbying activity that you performed on behalf of the league that you'd like to call out for our membership, or if there were really interesting perspectives or discussions that took place during the committee hearing that our membership wouldn't otherwise know unless they were there. That's something that we want to call out. So that's kind of what we mean by, you know, sort of reporting on the status. And then as Tony mentioned, to the extent that you believe your legislation has a Jedi impact or implication, we want to call that out too and give you know, just a brief explanation about, you know, what we think that implication is and why it's important to us as an organization, why our membership should care about this. We do have a couple of sample bill summaries that are in the advocacy toolkit on the State League site. Again, I do have a slide at the end that kind of calls out how to get there. It is through the member login section, but we'll make sure that you get this information in a couple of different ways. So those are pretty accessible to you if you want to take a look at, you know, just a couple of samples from last year that, you know, sort of adhere to that kind of general outline that we've typically used. Let's see, and I see a hand from Anne and then Maud.
I just want to clarify again, and maybe you're still going to cover this in discussing Capitol Watch, but in Capitol Watch, there's a section where they copy directly from the bill, the bill summary, and they do that automatically. But then there's a section called custom summary, and that's what I've been using to describe the league position, relevance, and so on. So is that what you're, when in answering Kathy's question, when you're talking about summaries, are you talking about the custom summary, which would be similar to what we would present to LAC, but maybe a little more formal since it gets published?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of making that distinction. And for those that have used the system before, we really want to be preparing this in a way that kind of adheres to the process you've used in the past for the custom summary. Really, I think some of the key things, because the Capitol Watch summaries, I agree, are, you know, they're all there, they're useful, you know, they're easy to understand in most cases. But what we want to do that I think is a little bit different than what they're producing is to identify the state league position, how this legislation implicates that, why our membership should care. So that's what we want to be capturing in that custom summary. But for those that are new this year, you won't necessarily see it presented in this way because we're not asking individual members to go into the Capitol Watch system and input the summary there. We're really just asking that you create the summary and send it on to us, and the Capitol Watch administrators will handle that. And that's really kind of intended to, you know, hopefully kind of streamline the activity. And, you know, we know that there are several people that, you know, feel like using the system is difficult and it's a little bit of a barrier to their participation in LEC. So we're just really looking to get away from that. And Maud, I see you have a hand.
Yeah, two things. One is you've mentioned the state
league positions. But I know at least in revenue, I often use a national position. So,
Maud, this is Tony.
Yeah.
I'm going to cover that.
okay, fantastic. I will table that question. And the other question is, Andrew, you were talking about the bill summary, the custom summary, and sending it if it's a bill that we want to go to LAC. We emailed the summary to you and Tony before the meeting. That summary is only going to is not going to have anything we have done on the bill yet, because we don't have permission to do anything on the bill because we didn't get, it hasn't gone through LAC yet. And then, right?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
You know, you won't advocate or, engage in lobbying activities around a bill until we have a position on it. So initially that's true, but as those bills that we've, identified as kind of our priority areas where we do have a position, as they start moving through the process and there's, changes and significant activity to report, just update your summary, including that information that you want to highlight for our membership, and send a new one on to Tony and I.
Okay, so it's the initial summary and then the updates are a separate thing. So we should hang on to we should keep a file of our summaries.
Yeah, just go ahead and I'm not sure how much of you have it set up. I'm assuming maybe, a Word document or a Google Doc or something along those lines. And then you can just go and, easily update once there's something significant that you want to make sure that our membership's aware of. You don't necessarily need to really focus on, it just moving through the process unless, there's a specific reason that, you want to call that out, because, our membership will be able to access the legislation through our bill list. So they'll see that basic status information. I think it's really more, the things that kind of go beyond what you can get just from a website, and your knowledge, as the lobbyist in a particular issue area that you want to call out for our membership. So kind of focusing on those sorts of things.
Okay, super, thanks. Oh, and the summaries for bills that we don't want to bring to LIC. Do we also send those to you and Tony with a note that says, not bringing it to LIC, just want it in Capital Watch?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's legislation that you want our membership to know about, but you're just going to kind of monitor it in the background. Just let us know. But I think it's still valuable information if you feel like there are reasons our membership should know.
Okay.
And Kathy, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, one of the things we did toward the end, middle to end of last session, was to send you a summary and ask for a vote through stream meetings a little bit. Would we be doing that this time again?
Kathy, we're breaking up a little bit, but you're asking about the email votes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can still utilize that process. I think it's something, as legislation starts to move really fast, and for newer people, there are definitely going to be times as the session gets underway where there's a bill that's been introduced and it's scheduled for a committee hearing prior to our next LIC meeting. We can call for an email vote. The only thing that we would ask there is that you go ahead and prepare that summary with your recommendation on what the vote should be, similar to what we all did last year. But we'll still just, take that summary as if you had provided it to us before an LIC meeting. And, once we establish the position on it, we'll get that up on Capital Watch. But we can absolutely continue to do email votes on stuff that's just really fast moving. All right, I will move on to the next slide here. Okay, so, after you've got your issue area set, you've got your bills established that, we're going to be following, and you've got the LAC position on those. You'll go ahead and continue to monitor that legislation throughout the legislative process until the bill either becomes a law or it's killed along the way, or was referred to as postponed indefinitely, where, the committee, for new people, sometimes, the committee's not going to use language where they're specifically saying they're killing a bill. They'll say that it's being postponed indefinitely. That in reality means that the bill is killed and, will not be moving forward. So you'll go ahead and follow that throughout the legislative process and continue to report the significant updates on that, so we can keep our bill lists and summaries current. You'll most likely want to provide testimony at some point. You don't necessarily have to. It's kind of a judgment call. If for the legislation that we've decided to support or oppose, we'll want to follow that through the committee hearings. And if you feel this is something that, you want to make sure that we're sharing the league perspective on this, and you do want to testify, you'll need to, make sure that you are following the schedule on that, so when your bill is coming up for a hearing. You can access committee information through the link here. You will also get alerts through Capitol Watch. So you should be getting the information in a couple of different ways, or there's a couple different ways to find it, whatever works best for you. Monitor those hearings, attend the ones where that, there's going to be activity on your bill. And if you're wanting to testify, you can do that in person, at least as far as we know. And you can also do that remotely. And then there is a link here to, both monitor the floor and committee hearings remotely. And then there's also a link where you can sign up to provide testimony remotely through Zoom. So when you sign up to provide testimony, whether you're doing it in person or remotely, you'll need to provide some basic information, which is really just your name, your affiliation, which is the league, contact information. If you're not comfortable providing your home contact information, please feel free to use the office address and phone number. And then you'll need to state the position that you'll be testified to in relation to that particular bill. The little bit of change here, we've had some conversations kind of exploring ways to build out our legislative action page, our advocacy page on the State League website. We would like to request that as you're preparing your testimony, that you also provide a written copy of it to Tony and I. We know that, leagues in other states post their testimony on the website, and we've had conversations that, I think the feeling is that this could be really useful information for our membership in letting them know, what our advocacy efforts are, giving them some insight into, what our rationale that's being presented in the testimony is about how a particular bill is either beneficial or detrimental to LWVCO positions. So if you could provide that to us, we would love to start getting that up on the website, so our membership has a really clear sense of what our advocacy efforts are, and kind of help them understand the impact that the LAC has. Okay, moving on to the next slide. I want to say a little bit about participation in stakeholder meetings. I know many of you do this, but I want to call it out for those who might be completely new to the LAC or are newer and are still kind of learning an issue area. Stakeholder meetings are a great place to, get more information around your issue area, your topic. By attending these meetings, you can kind of stay tuned into, emerging issues, areas where groups are, exploring the need for forthcoming legislation. You can help provide input on developing legislation in some instances. So it can be just a great way to, become really immersed in your issue area and to have a bigger impact, a very action-oriented impact. And, I've mentioned a couple of times that LAC can be a heavy lift. Stakeholder meetings take place during both the session and the interim. The interim is often the time when new legislation is being considered and starts to be developed. So if you have the time and inclination to participate in those meetings during the interim, that can be a great way for us to be action oriented within that particular topic. We understand that's not going to work for everyone, so I just kind of want to put that out there, but that it's an option for you, and it can be a really useful thing to do. If it doesn't work for you, that is perfectly okay. And this is another area where having those issue area teams can be really helpful to kind of spread our coverage and really kind of maximize that coverage. I know many of you have been tuned into the stakeholder groups in your issue areas for years. For those that are newer, Tony and I can certainly help provide suggestions on groups to connect with. Our partner organization list that the State League maintains is also a good place to start if you're just kind of really unsure about what's out there, particularly maybe if you're new to Colorado. And that list could be sort of a great resource to get a sense of groups that you'd like to connect with. And then we've got a link there. But certainly Tony and I can provide more information there. Mon, do you still have a hand up, or is that a new hand?
That's a new hand, sorry. Are we going to talk about providing written testimony and upon adjournment meetings that start at 5 p.m. and go till midnight? Or is that going to be later in the session when we talk about those?
I don't have that information specifically on the slide, but for those that are newer, what Mon is referring to is that, there are some bills that, are very, very high profile. The controversial ones tend to draw tons of testimony, both sometimes in favor, sometimes against, sometimes both. And it can be a really time-consuming process. This is an area where, like, if you know that you don't have 8 hours to sit in a committee hearing, or you just don't have the inclination to do that in the era of COVID, this is submitting written testimony, can be a really great way to make sure that we're getting the league perspective across. If you do have the time and you feel very strongly about being there in person to provide that testimony, that's fantastic. But just know that, providing a written version of your testimony is an option. And hopefully, I think most people are probably preparing written testimony one way or another, but since we're formalizing that a bit and trying to get that in shape to make that publicly visible on our website, my hope would be that that would also be a very suitable copy for you to, provide to the Sergeant at Arms if, you needed to leave, or if you are providing remote testimony through the remote testimony portal, you can upload it. So there's a couple of different ways to go about that. But it's a good point that Maude brings up, because sometimes you can find yourself in a time crunch and, you want the point to get across, but you just don't have the ability to stay there. So that can be a good option.
Andrea, I know last year there was a conversation about whether the legislators really read the material that was sent to them without a vocal presentation. I think that there has been some change to that. What do you hear about that?
I think my inclination, I would say, is to feel that I think the majority of them are trying to pay attention to it. I do think that, it's been called out in different forms. We're not the only group that has questioned that. And so I think that, there is some awareness that, the public is very concerned about making sure that, that public input is provided and taken seriously. So I do think that there is an effort to make sure that they're keeping up with that. But I think there's always going to be people that are a little bit checked out of the process. And I don't know exactly how we get around that completely. I think the sooner that, this hearing is headed in a direction where I am not going to be able to stay till the end and provide the testimony in person, which, is one of the most visible, impactful ways to do that. But I think the sooner the sooner you can get that information in front of them, the better. It's kind of an imperfect process. And I guess I don't have like a magic solution there, but I do think that, to me, it seems like there's an effort to, really pay attention to public input around these issues. And I'll also say too that, the committee hearing itself isn't the only opportunity to share those perspectives with legislators. If there's a bill that, is something that we feel really impacts us as an organization, and we want to make sure that we're being heard if we have specific questions, you can contact the bill sponsors directly. You can contact the committee members directly, potentially set up appointments, that kind of thing. So, there are a couple of different ways to try and make sure that your communication is getting through, but they're not necessarily foolproof. Tony, is that kind of what you were thinking, or have you noticed other things? Or
Yeah, I just think you should think about the best way, if you can't be there in person, meaning both virtually and in person, how you can get the information to the legislators who are sitting on the committee particularly. And, maybe one is emailing them with your presentation. So anyhow, I think you should just think about whether you're getting the message across or not.
I think it's a great point, to kind of have that plan B in mind. So, we make sure that we are getting that point across. Jan, I see that you have a hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. And probably because I'm new and hopefully not because I missed the first meeting. But can you explain basically why it's a good place to start the partner organizations for stakeholder meetings?
I think my thinking on it was that if you're very unfamiliar about, who some of the stakeholder groups are within the issue area that you choose to follow, and you just kind of need a sense of, who are some of the other, like-minded advocates that work in this space along with the league, or potentially people that, we have either collaborated with in the past or that we're members of their organization, organizations that are likely to align with our thinking and our positions, that sort of thing. The list of partner organizations is a great place to start to kind of get a sense of what that landscape looks like. It kind of depends on the area. There are several organizations on there. Some of them, may be aligned with the issue that you're following. Others may not be. And that's where, when I say that, if you've got specific questions, Tony and I can always provide some input on, how to get started on that. If you're working in an area that's got an issue area team, your team will certainly, for those that have been involved in the issue for a while or participated in LAC in the past, they will certainly have suggestions on that as well. But the partner organization is just kind of that list will give you a good sense of, places that we, or entities that we either have memberships with or have collaborated with, or you just kind of can scan it to get a sense of the landscape there.
And I would say it's really important to check in with them, the ones that the usual suspects for people who are organizations that do what we do and have a position generally what we have. Because you can coordinate your presentations, your testimony, and you can have one organization do one thing and another organization do another thing. And you're not taking the time and duplicating things for the legislators. And they really very much appreciate not having people say the same thing over and over and over again. And you can be stronger on your points too when you are taking a specific point instead of trying to cover the whole gamut of issues within the piece of legislation, remembering that you generally have 3 minutes to make your presentation. So that's one thing. The other thing is just, knowing where the other organizations are, whether you need to try to convince them to change their position or not, or how you can all be working together.
Great, thank you.
And Sandy, I see that you have a hand raised.
Yes, I'm following the development of a possible bill right from the beginning with the Colorado, with the Recycle Colorado. And they've got a bunch of people, environmental groups involved. And I've been going to the meetings, just listening, you know, and trying to figure out whether we could possibly support the bill or not. And they want us to help them get it into a bill in the first place. Do we ever do that?
Yes, we do. That's something we're trying to move towards doing more of, is
Good.
being part of really initiating the bills. And it's a good time when you're working with the people you've been meeting with to get our position into a bill also.
Right.
And so you could be fairly active with writing the bill.
Okay. I'm going to send you both kind of a summary and see what you think.
Okay,
of
great.
what's happened so far.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sandy. And it's really a great illustration of, you know, why participation in those stakeholder meetings can be a way to have more impact and be more action oriented, because you are in on things from the development
Yeah.
stage.
And they're
Yeah,
doing these
we're-
stakeholder meetings now before it becomes a bill. So there's a whole
Yeah.
lot going on.
Well,
we
and
wouldn't know
if you
about.
really, I'm sorry, if you really are doing this process, you probably should start working on bills that you want in the next session almost immediately after the end of the session. It's important because you need to line up your, you know, sponsors and all those kinds of things and get people enthused about the topic. So we've got a couple of things that we've been working on over the interim also at the state level. And so, you know, it's something that we really want to push, is working in the interim to get bills introduced that represent what we would like.
Great.
All right, I have got one more slide before I turn it over to Tony. This is just kind of a brief mention about our action alerts. You know, we issue action alerts, you know, periodically throughout the year. You certainly will see them in relation to specific bills that we feel strongly about. And the intent really is to, you know, put the alert out to our statewide membership to mobilize them around a specific issue or bill. We will, you know, LAC will help identify, you know, areas where, like, if you're following a bill and you know that it may be facing some headwinds in a committee hearing, or, you know, when it's coming up for a floor vote, you know, you can flag that for us and we will get an action alert out. We would ask, and we can certainly support this, but we would ask members to provide a brief summary of what you want that action alert to be, because you need to remember, since it's going out to a broader membership, there needs to be some context for people that would otherwise be unfamiliar with it because they don't participate in LAC, and then some information about how it's you know, going to be useful to channel the contact. If it's you know, a committee hearing, you know, we will want to focus the communication and the calls that we're asking our membership to make to that committee. If it's particular legislators that, you know, we know are some holdouts on a floor vote, it may be focused on them. It just kind of varies by the situation. But I wanted to mention it because it is something that LAC, you know, identifies several times throughout a session. So it's certainly something that will come up. I do want to say that we are moving to a new platform for producing action alerts. I have not had experience creating one in this new system, and it's not something that we'll ask you to do directly. We'll be looking to you all to help identify and help provide substantive information, but that'll really be created at the staff level. So just to kind of let you know that that's out there. You know, this is something we'll discuss more as the need for the action alert arises. But I just wanted to flag that early on, so you can kind of have that in the back of your mind, that that's another tool that we use to, you know, advocate for legislation that we either support or oppose. And Sandy, did you have a question on that? Oh, you're on mute, Sandy.
I just need to put my hand down. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. All right. Well, I will turn it over to Tony now.
Okay, before I start, Andrea, there was a question about where to find the recordings of these trainings. And I don't know the answer.
You know, I'm not 100% sure that I know the answer to that. Beth, are you still on the line? Okay, I will find that out. I know that we are, I think it's through our YouTube channel, but I don't know, I don't have the details to guide you to the right place exactly. So I will find that out and make sure that that information gets out to you all.
Okay, you can move to the next slide. All right, this is a review that just to let you know, or just to have you think about the different divisions of the league. So we have voter service, education, advocacy, and lobbying. And the voter service and education piece are separate from the advocacy and lobbying. Advocacy can also be looked at in a very general, larger context. Advocacy for the organization, advocacy just for the idea of what we stand for, and then lobbying tends to be more specific. Moving to the next one. So the league is nonpartisan, as you probably all well know, but we still have questions about this. The league positions are nonpartisan. They are pro and con materials that we look at. We study things. Some would say we study things a bit too much, but we are trying to streamline that process as well. But the league positions are nonpartisan. And the league organization is nonpartisan. And probably the best way to explain that to people is that we do not take positions on candidates and elected officials. We talk about and we take positions on issues, but not people. Next. So speaking with one voice, National League is responsible for national policies and consistency at the national level. The State League is responsible for state policies and consistency at the state level. Local leagues cooperate with one another to ensure regional issues are addressed in a consistent manner. And of course, local leagues can, if they have positions that are not counter to the other two levels of league, national, state, they could go ahead and take positions as well on issues that we have not studied other places. The president is usually the designated spokesperson, but the president or someone who's given the authority can designate another spokesperson to be responsible for speaking for the league. Now, this is something that's a little bit different. We sort of generally give approval to the people who are the experts in the LAC to speak at the state legislature without always coming and saying, "Mother, may I?" You are in an active place. You need to be active as well and ready to take some positions or to offer some different ideas. And we think that we all have a pretty good idea of what the positions are, so that you can all speak generally and not counter them. You all are experts pretty much in the areas that you sign up for. Next. Okay, so using the league position books, this goes to Maud's question. League positions can be used from levels above your league. Local leagues may use their own positions, the state positions, and the national positions. So you can use all three of them as long as they're not contradicting each other. The league acts only on issues for which we have positions and in ways our positions indicate. So we have done all those studies, all that talking, taking positions in the past based on what the issues are that we have studied, and that we try to do the position statements in a more general way so that they can be applied to specifics. It's okay to take a position on something that's very, very specific if it follows the lines of the positions of the league. So again, they're broad general statements to be construed broadly. Positions on various topics may be used together when the issue crosses topic lines. So for example, if you're using a position on air quality, and you also want to include the fact that the air quality in a particular part of Denver is not very good, and you want to say what the impact is on the people in that area, the income levels perhaps, but mostly maybe the health level of those people, you need, you can use both the income positions or the effect of poverty positions and the air quality positions. You may use both of them. And that happens quite frequently where positions cross the lines and they're not just one topic. Even if a national position references just the national level of government, and you'll find that in a few positions in the national book, the position may still be used at the state and local levels. And that is something the National League has stated, and they just haven't changed the wording because that was the wording at the time that the consensus question was written. The state board approves the action of the LAC, usually retroactively, except under special circumstances. So the LAC, we come to the board meeting of the league, of the state league, with the positions and the actions that the LAC has taken, but we've already taken it. But the state league needs to know that what positions we're taking and what we're working on. And if there is something that's very controversial and the LAC would like the state board to discuss it before a position is taken, then the issue goes to the state board before we take an official position. Next. These are the two program books that you should have some way or another, either in your iPad, PC, whatever, and or in hard copy. So Program of Study and Action is the State League book, and Impact on Issues is the National League book. And they generally have positions in both areas, and of course the Program of Study and Action, which is a state league book, is a little bit more focused on state issues. But again, the impact on issues should be used as well. Next. Do not expect you to read this, but these are the league principles. You will find them both in the National League program book and the State League book. These can be also used along with the positions that are in the book under each of the issue areas. So protect the right to vote, of course, is a position. Protect active participation in government. It's not going to be easy to find a specific position on that piece in the position books, but you can use the principles. The principles come from the very early history of the League of Women Voters And they weren't doing the studies in the same way that we do them now. But so they put together all the things that they had worked on and made the principles, and then we go from there with the program books. Next, in fact, there was a question, wasn't there? Let's see. Yes, there is a new state position book. It will be out very shortly, as soon as they have the table of contents. So, and there are some changes in it, but usually the update for the position books is every 2 years. We may do it every year, but every 2 years to change the positions if we have new ones, and also to update the history to tell us in the book what we have done with that particular position. Okay, anything else from anybody? Okay, so local issues, I've touched on this a bit. You can use local, state, and national positions without permission when acting at the local level. Regional issues are when something affects more than one league. So we had the Suncor issue in the Denver metropolitan area, but it particularly affected Adams County and Denver. So the two leagues needed to work together to address the issue and to decide how they were going to work. So this is an example of crossing the lines among the local leagues. So the state issue, the local league can interact with state government representatives in response to a state league call to action. So if the state league says, please do this, please write to your legislator, your state legislator, you can do that since we've said it's okay. And that and if it's something that's been identified as a priority issue, you can do the same thing. You can also go to the state board and ask permission if you're not quite sure. An information report to the state league is always helpful, so we know that's what's going on in the different local leagues. Next. Next. Thank you. Okay, and taking a position on a national issue, the local or state league may interact with national government representatives in response to a LWVUS call to action. So it's the same thing. So if the National League has asked you to do something, you don't have to ask permission from the National League to go ahead and do it. And the same thing for the priority issues. It's the same process as the state taking positions or taking action at the state level or taking actions at the national level or with permission. There's an information report that should be submitted to the state and National League. The federal action request, if you want to do something outside of the call for actions or call for action or the priority issues, you need to get permission from the National League. That's to make sure that we're all speaking with one voice and that perhaps another state league wants to take a position also. And they need to be able to coordinate between the two states. So if it's not a call to action and it's not one of our priority issues, you go to the federal action request form, fill that out, and the National League will respond. Next. Okay, ballot issues. The LIC is responsible for discussing proposed ballot issues. These are pretty much always, well, the ones that we see, are state issues. And so again, it's like the legislature. We need to have a position on them. Ballot issues, the citizens of Colorado are considered the legislature. So that's another part of why the LAC needs to be involved in discussing the ballot issues. And we'll do the same format that we're going to be doing pretty much for the issues that come up in the state legislature. The LAC makes a recommendation regarding a proposed ballot issue, and then the recommendation does go to the state board before a position is taken. The state board does need to discuss the ballot issues. These generally are higher profile than many of the issues that come up in the state legislature. So the recommendation for a proposed ballot issue may be support, oppose, no position, or neutral. So the LAC makes a recommendation, which goes to the state board, and the state board discusses, and they can they can do what the recommendation is, or they can make some suggestions and refer it back to the LAC if they want further discussion. Next. So the positions on ballot issues, local leagues may not take a position on a particular issue that is in conflict with either the national or state position. Local league boards should vote on whether they want to follow the position of the national or state league. Local leagues may remain neutral if they do not want to follow the national or state position. So local leagues are not automatically forced to do what the state or the national league says. So consistency matters, and that's why we don't want a voice that is different than what the state league or the national league is saying. It's very important for us to all be on the same page on our positions. Next. Now, this is where sometimes it gets a little tricky. So you have ballot issue presentations in the fall, and the league, of course, goes out and makes presentations and tells people about what is on the ballot. And they give the audience some amount of pro and cons. And they don't do advocacy. They're not lobbying, they're not doing advocacy. They are telling people about whatever it is. So then the next point, however, is that you always will get the question about, well, what's the league's position? And we've been very stringent about, you can't tell them what the league position is. This turns out to not be a very satisfactory answer for the people in the audience. So as we did with the ballot issues this year, at the very end of the ballot issue pamphlet, we put in the website where you could find the league position. So if you are making an in-person or even a Zoom meeting presentation, what you should do is say, now I have finished doing the voter service presentation. I will do a separate presentation to tell you what the positions of the league are. And then you can go ahead and give people the positions. So it's kind of an artificial way of doing it, but hopefully people will understand what we're doing and that we have two different divisions within the league. Next. So that's the end. There's Andrea and my email contact information. There's a toolkit on the LWV Colorado website, a member document library item, and you can go there, and there are several pieces of information. Some of them we've mentioned here in this presentation. So any further questions? I only see okay, I see one question here about priority issues. Sometimes we have priority issues and sometimes we don't. So the priority issues sometimes come from the annual meeting of the League of Women Voters, and it's a list, generally a short list of things that people want us to focus on that aren't necessarily legislative issues. So you are given, you are shown, you're told what the priorities are. And at the national level, they come up with one or two priorities that they will focus on at the congressional level. So, and again, you will be told what those are. Did I get everyone? I guess so. So, Andrea, do you have anything more you want to say?
No, I think that covers it for me. You know, we just encourage you to log into the member portion of the website. You can find the advocacy toolkit there in documents. If you have trouble locating it, let us know and we can direct you there. But, and certainly as questions come up along the way, please feel free to get in touch. But I think that hits the high points of what we were hoping to discuss today.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Yeah, we've got a few
Joe?
questions still.
I want to thank you.
Joe,
I want to thank you for a very clear and very efficient presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, Maude?
Is the slide deck going to be in the advocacy folder?
Yes, it will get added there. Mhm.
Okay, super, thanks. And I think
Anything
Kathy
else?
has a hand up.
If not, we will say goodbye and see you
No,
short.
no, Kathy has a hand up too.
Okay.
Hopefully I won't break up this time. I was just wondering when we're going to get the list of who is going to be in charge of the different issue areas.
I'm still collecting responses from people about, you know, the issue areas, either that they want to continue with or if they're looking, you know, to cover a new issue. I will update that prior to our meeting on January 21st and send that out.
Is that okay, Kathy, or should we just send out what we have now?
Kathy, you're on mute.
I'm still muted. Okay, here we go. I think I'd rather have the full list. So, you know, as soon as you get everything put together, I think that'll be helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Anybody else before I say goodbye again?
Joe has a question.
Joe?
Joe, you're on mute.
I just want Tony to repeat her telephone number.
My telephone number,
Yes.
720.
Oh, well, yeah, 720.
387-8487. That's my home number. Generally, I hear that better than I hear my cell phone.
Hello.
Speaking of cell phones. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the session.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Good session. Thank you.